Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Kiorkof, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about early round draft strategies for the 2023 fantasy football season. Now, like I'm sure we've all experienced, there's no one singular way to draft or win in fantasy football. There's a multitude of strategies that you can employ to find success, whether that be a heavy RB draft strategy, hero RB draft strategy, or even zero RB draft strategy where you avoid the position altogether. I have personally firsthand experienced success with all three of those facets. But with that being the case, as we approach the 2023 season, my perspective has shifted. As the meta of fantasy football and the entire landscape changes every season, so does my draft strategy. Approaching the 2023 season, my objective is to go ahead and in every single opportunity I have to make a selection, pick the best available player. The primary reason of that case is because by the time we get to week 17 and you're competing for a fantasy football championship, the team that you drafted on draft day is not going to even be remotely the same as your team that is represented in week 17. Unless you get seriously lucky and avoid injuries, you don't make any trades, and you don't make any waiver wire pickups. So the purpose of today's video is to make sure that you hit on all those early round selections, because the nucleus of your team, the strong foundation that you build on draft day, is going to go a long way in terms of determining your potential for success or failure for the 2023 season. And the objective of this season is to help you win a championship. So we'll go ahead and try to set you up with all the information and statistics that I've gathered over the offseason that can lead to your success. Now, before we get into talking about the early round draft strategies for the 2023 season, over to the right side of the screen includes my 2023 fantasy football draft guide and rankings. For those of you who are interested and want to get your hands on my draft guide that has more information than what we're going to be sharing on today's video, be sure to go ahead and check out Underdog Fantasy. If you go ahead, travel to the link in the description of the video and sign up using code Andrew. Make a first time deposit minimum of $10. You're not only going to get the first time deposit match up to $100. You're not only going to get my 2023 fantasy football draft guide and rankings. Those rankings will be updated every week and sent to your email from me personally to make sure that you're always up to date regardless of when you're drafting. And you're additionally going to get weekly Sunday morning rankings from me to you, which includes full PPR rankings, which is never on the channel, and flex rankings, which I never offer on the channel either, available to you every Sunday morning, emailed to you, so that you can help yourself win a 2023 fantasy football championship. So take advantage of the opportunity. Sign up using code Andrew. Make that first time deposit minimum of $10. Again, for those of you who are wondering whether you're eligible to go ahead and play via Underdog, the map kind of gives you an understanding and reference as to whether or not you are eligible to play. So go ahead, check it out today. Link is in the description. Thank you very much. And draft responsibly. All right, let's get into talking about our early round draft strategies, beginning with the first round, because that's where it all begins. So let's talk about the objective of the first round. In my opinion, the objective of your first round selection is to ensure that you pick a player that by the end of the season is going to finish as a top 12 flex player. What that means is amongst all running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, they're going to be in the top 12 overall in terms of fantasy points scored. If you're able to achieve that and accomplish that, you're in a fantastic position. If you falter, whether it is drafting a player that does not end up living up to expectations or potentially gets injured, those are things that at times are out of your control, but you want to go ahead and succeed immediately off the bat, because that is going to put you in a fantastic position for the remainder of the season. So in order to kind of give you an idea as to which positions we should potentially be targeting, I wanted to demonstrate on screen the top 12 flex positional distribution over the course of the last 3 seasons, 2020 through 2022. As you can see on screen, we have nearly an identical representation between the running back and wide receiver position over the last couple of years, as we've seen 17 running backs be top 12 flex options, along with 16 wide receivers and 3 tight ends. So honestly, it's pretty identical year over year. The only change being in 2021, where there was one extra wide receiver within the top 12 flex in a half PPR scoring format. So in my mind, this gives me the utmost confidence in either drafting a running back, a wide receiver, or Travis Kelce as we approach our first round of our 2023 drafts. Now, despite me showing you this information, I have seen that the meta of fantasy football is beginning to make a shift. Via Underdog Fantasy right now, if you go to their best ball draft, we're currently seeing about 3 running backs, 8 wide receivers, and 1 tight end coming off the board in the first round. The fact that we are seeing 8 wide receivers come off the board is absolutely ridiculous. Now, I wanted to go ahead and compare that to something like ESPN's ADPs. And as of this current moment in time on ESPN, we're seeing about 5 running backs, 6 wide receivers, and 1 tight end go in the first round, while the first quarterback is being selected early in the second round rather than late. So again, there is a little bit of a difference overall, but in my mind, the distribution of selections within your first round should entail far more running backs than it currently does on a format like Underdog Fantasy, because it is a best ball format. It is a little bit different, but I'll explain to you over the course of this video why we're seeing far more wide receiver selections in the first round in comparison to seasons past. So as you guys can see to the graphic to the right of me, besides the top 12 positional distribution that I was referencing earlier, we also have running backs and wide receivers and how often they have incredible repeat seasons within being an RB1 and repeating as an RB1, or being an RB2 and elevating your game, or being a first-time RB1 overall within the position as a whole. In the last 3 seasons, we have seen a distribution of running backs who have been in the top 12 of their position, follow up and maintain that top 12 standing 16 times. That's about a 44.44% success rate. It's an okay percentage. While we look at the wide receiver position, as they've only totaled 14 of those instances, that's a 39% success rate. Overall, relatively close. But when you go ahead and see how many running backs elevate from being an RB2 and jumping up to the RB1 conversation in comparison to wide receiver 2s that jump up into the wide receiver 1 conversation, there's a little bit of a disparity there. Now, this really shouldn't be much of a surprise considering the running back position is so heavily embedded with opportunity leading to player success. But then again, just wanted to go ahead and represent that on screen. Additionally, with first-time RB1s and first-time wide receiver 1s being relatively close, as we've seen in the last 3 seasons, 10 different running backs who have been within the top 12 rankings for the first time in their careers. That's a 27% success rate, while 12 wide receivers have done that, which is a 33% success rate amongst all in the league. Overall, pretty even distribution between these two positions. So yet, why are we continuing to see so many wide receivers come off the board in the first round? Which got me thinking, is there a fear at the running back position? Are people afraid of selecting a running back and them getting injured? Are they afraid of regression? The potential age of some of these running backs, of course, guys like Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, they're getting up there in age at a point to where the drop-off is soon to be. But after thinking about it for a while, it's really leaning towards the idea that people are beginning to really trust running back depth. While in seasons past, we have not been able to do so in any sort of capacity, considering rounds 3 through 8, the running back quote-unquote dead zone has killed many of our rosters and chances of winning a fantasy football championship. Yet last season, and hopefully going into the 2023 year, we've seen a lot of success in that range. Let's go ahead and explain that. Last season, as of Underdog Fantasy's ADPs from August 28th through the 5th, we saw the running back dead zone find a lot of success in comparison to seasons past. Now, in order to represent the 18 running backs that were selected from rounds 3 through 8 of last year's Underdog Fantasy drafts based on ADP, I've gone ahead and put up a graphic that kind of demonstrates the 3 pools of players and how they performed based on where they were drafted. So last season, of the 18 running backs that were selected between rounds 3 through 8 on average, we saw 4 of these running backs produce exact or improved seasons based on their ADP or when they were selected at the running back position. Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, Ramondre Stevenson, all those guys being league winners. Now, the next group of running backs entail James Conner, Travis Etienne, Ezekiel Elliott, A.J. Dillon, Dameon Pierce, David Montgomery, and Antonio Gibson. And even though some of these players did deal with injuries, James Conner, Dameon Pierce, David Montgomery, Ezekiel Elliott, and they did miss some time last season, they still ended up producing pretty well. They were between 1 to 7 ranks of what their average ADP was last season. So overall, they weren't disappointments, and sure, they could have played better at times, but in my mind, overall, the investment paid off in these scenarios, which in comparison to seasons past, the reason why rounds 3 through 8 are considered the running back dead zone is because these players typically would falter and not give us the value that we drafted them out. Yet last season, we found a lot of success there. Now, the final group of players that we have on screen, 5 players. We had Breece Hall, J.K. Dobbins, Elijah Mitchell, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Rashad Penny. All 5 of these players had unpredictable injuries that obviously derailed their seasons as a whole. So I went ahead and demonstrated a total of 16 out of the 18 players, rounds 3 through 8 that were selected last season. Obviously, 5 of those guys, unpredictable injuries that we could not, see coming. 7 of those guys, honestly, were pretty much in a decent spot, and 4 of those guys produced far beyond our expectations, which was fantastic. So as a whole, when we witness last season's running back dead zone, it probably gives many confidence that going into the 2023 season, we're going to see a very similar distribution of production from running backs within those rounds. So selecting an early wide receiver within the first and second rounds are fine when you can go ahead and bank on the idea of selecting running backs from rounds 3 through 8 that are going to give you enough depth and have enough opportunity to justify themselves not only being players that are probably RB2s, but some of them will definitely be RB1s. The fact that we have currently Najee Harris going in, I think his current ADP on Underdog or ESPN is around 37, 38 overall. He's a 4th round selection. Getting a player with that level of opportunity that late in drafts kind of leans you in the idea of, hey, maybe we should go ahead and select early wide receivers, considering they've had so much consistency of success over the last couple seasons. Now, when we go ahead and compare the running back selected throughout rounds 3 through 8 of last year in comparison to wide receivers, the wide receiver position didn't really find much success. In fact, it was far more volatile in comparison. Last season, there were 34 wide receivers selected between rounds 3 through 8 in terms of ADPs on Underdog between August 28th and September 5th of 2022. 15 of those wide receivers produced exact or improved overall seasons, so 15 of the 34, while 10 of them dealt with injuries that were unpredictable, and 9 of them didn't live up to expectations. So that's 26.5% of the wide receivers that just didn't live up to expectations, in comparison to only 11% of that being the case for the running back position. Again, far more volatile in that case. Now, besides the RB dead zone certainly playing a factor in our draft strategies in seasons past, so has the drop-off in production. What I've gone ahead and demonstrated on screen to the right side is the drop-off in production at all 3 primary flex positions: running back, wide receiver, and tight end, for a half PPR scoring format. These are averages based on their rankings over the last 3 seasons. So the number 1 overall running back for the last 3 consecutive seasons has averaged 336.2 fantasy points. Now, when you go ahead and you look at the top 32 players ranked over the course of the last 3 seasons, on average, we find that the running back position eventually falls off. But in comparison to the wide receiver position, which is typically the give or take when you are going ahead and selecting in those middle rounds between rounds 3 through 8, there isn't that much of a difference. Yes, eventually it gets to a point where there's a 20-point gap between those 2 players, and selecting the best overall player, you want to lean with someone who's going to score an additional 20 points within that season, assuming it's a depth play and someone that is going to contribute. But overall, even the drop-off in production over the last couple seasons hasn't been significant enough and hasn't been a factor to where you're fearful of not selecting a running back early in your first 3 rounds and then leaning upon the wide receiver position for the remainder of those middle rounds. Now, with this all mentioned, okay, now that we've established all of this, the foundation here, I want to approach the idea of how do we determine who we're selecting in our first 3 rounds? How do we determine which running backs, which wide receivers? Well, let's talk about the running back position in specific. Like I mentioned all the time, opportunity leads to success in fantasy football. The greatest prospect of scoring more fantasy points on a weekly basis derives from the idea of touching the ball more. So if you give the running back more opportunities, they're going to score more fantasy points. Over the course of the last 10 seasons of fantasy football, I've gone ahead and demonstrated fantasy points per attempt and fantasy points per target in terms of an average over the course of the last decade. If you can go ahead and give your running back 20 rushing attempts in a singular game, based on averages, of course, they're going to find a boatload of success. And even though not all opportunities are built the same, we've seen opportunities like Jamal Williams last season where he lined up, on the 1 yard line and plugged in a bunch of rushing touchdowns and gave himself a huge influx of fantasy points, while we've seen other running backs who are handed off the ball and stuffed to -7 yards in the backfield. Not all opportunities are, equal, but the primary reason why I wanted to go ahead and represent fantasy points per attempt and target is to just echo my sentiments in regards to how valuable opportunity is at the running back position, or in fact, the matter in any position within fantasy football. But when we're focusing on running back specifically, I want to focus on players who have a lot of opportunity available to them every single week. The primary purpose of this is because, again, if you see more opportunities, of course, you're going to score more potential fantasy points. Now, the evolution of the National Football League over the course of the last 20 years has certainly shifted. I mean, if you go back to 2003 to 2012, like demonstrated to the graphic to the right of me, we saw significantly more running backs who were given 300 plus rushing attempts, who were given 300 plus touches within a singular season. And in comparison to the last 10 years, it's not even close. We have seen the running back position significantly get less opportunities, which makes those running backs who are going to get 20 plus touches in a singular game on a consistent basis that much more valuable when we approach our draft. When you want to go ahead and get a workhorse running back, someone that is getting themselves an average of 21 opportunities or 20 total touches in a singular game, we're talking about players that from 2018 through 2022 have averaged 17.32 fantasy points per game. And in terms of averages, we've seen about 6 workhorse running backs who are averaging 20 plus touches per game each of the last 5 seasons. So there's a pretty good share of those running backs, but you got to make sure that you select them within those first couple rounds in order to ensure your success if you're going to invest in the running back position. Now, the reason why I have Derrick Henry on screen is because he is the perfect representation of a workhorse back in terms of getting an unimpeded volume of opportunity and being able to dominate because of the volume of touches he gets, and the fact that he's also getting a boatload of red zone rushing attempts makes him the perfect combination of a running back that you want on your roster. Guys like Christian McCaffrey, like I mentioned yesterday, Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, these are running backs that are getting themselves a boatload of opportunities, and hopefully if they continue to sustain that, they'll be fantastic fantasy options going into this upcoming season. Now, when we talk about early wide receivers that we may be looking to invest in, specifically, we have to look at opportunities, of course. Now, even though over the course of the last decade, we have seen fluctuation in terms of fantasy points per target, the primary reason why I wanted to demonstrate that is because, again, the more opportunity you get in terms of targets, the better off you are. So what I wanted to go ahead and do this offseason, in which I did, I wanted to figure out if there was a way to determine which wide receivers were going to be eligible of being a top 12 flex player based on what we have witnessed over the course of the last 3 seasons. Again, like I mentioned earlier, there have been 16 wide receivers who have finished within the top 12 flex and a half PPR scoring format in the last 3 seasons. Of those 16 wide receivers, we found that 75% of them were on teams that were in the top 12 of wide receiver targets. 75% of them were associated with teams that were in the top 12 of wide receiver receptions in their given year. 100% of those wide receivers, all 16 of them, were associated with teams that were in the top 12 in wide receiver receiving yards in their given season, and 94% of them were in the top 12 of wide receiver receiving touchdowns in their given season. Overall, when you want to go ahead and look at the course of the last 3 seasons and see which teams were in the top 12 of all of those statistics, all 4 of the primary wide receiver statistics, we find the Bengals, the Bills, the Cowboys, the Chargers, the Rams, the Vikings, and the Buccaneers. And when we go another step further and look at, obviously the wide receiver position is very determined on how well the quarterback play is within that team. And when we find the fact that of those 16 wide receivers, 88% of them were associated with teams that were in the top 16 in terms of quarterback passing yards in their given year. When we go ahead and look at the last 3 seasons and see what teams were capable of doing that, we once again see the Bills, the Bengals, the Cowboys, the Rams, and the Vikings, which again gives us more arguments as to why we want to be selecting guys like Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, and of course, Stephon Diggs. Because if the opportunity is there and your team is built to throw you the ball, of course, you're going to be a fantastic option and going to be a continued repeat, participant of being in that top 12 flex conversation every year and being a first round selection. Now, as we approach the 2023 season with so many solid options at wide receiver, that being Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, of course, like we mentioned, Stephon Diggs, who's been so consistent, Cooper Kupp, if he maintains to be healthy. I know Tyreek Hill is not on this list because obviously the Dolphins haven't been at this level as a team over the course of the last couple of years, but hopefully we'll continue to trend in that direction with him and Waddle. Tyreek Hill is another fantastic option as a wide receiver being selected early in our first rounds. These are wide receivers that are, in my opinion, incredible first round selections. Very confident in making those selections because additionally, like I made a point earlier, when we have guys like Najee Harris being selected at an ADP of 37 on ESPN and 38.5 on Underdog Fantasy, and then additionally we have guys like Tony Pollard with an ADP of 19.8 on Underdog Fantasy and 22.1 on ESPN, the ability to select a stud wide receiver in the first round and come back in the second round and select a guy like Tony Pollard, and then additionally get potentially another wide receiver in my third round, then follow up with Najee Harris in the fourth, that overall construction of a roster, in my mind, is the best way to approach it as we go into the 2023 fantasy football season, rather than just looking at the running back position and being afraid of the idea of not having enough running backs as the draft goes on and trying to avoid the dead zone that has been in the past. Being able to select an early wide receiver has never been more opportune going into 2023. Now that we've covered the wide receiver and running back conversation, I want to go ahead and mention tight ends because the argument for selecting Travis Kelce is a strong one. Again, Travis Kelce had an incredible season last year. The absence of Tyreek Hill continued to lean more targets and opportunity in his direction. He had an incredible season statistically. Obviously, the 17th game helped, but he's had the second best tight end fantasy season in terms of total fantasy points scored all time, only behind Rob Gronkowski based on his contribution last year. So Travis Kelce, a guy that has been the number 1 overall tight end in fantasy football in 6 of the last 7 seasons, probably in line to once again do it. But unless you're going to draft Travis Kelce late in your first round, I think the tight end position should be avoided overall. And the reason why I continue to bring this up is because the tight end position as a whole is a wasteland. Outside of the studs at the very top, like a Mark Andrews who's being selected in the third round, or Travis Kelce, who certainly should be coming off draft boards in the first round, we haven't seen much success from the position as a whole. I mean, just looking at the graphic on screen in terms of 2021 and 2022 tight end contributions, we have only seen 4 tight ends surpass 150 fantasy points in each of the last 2 seasons, while we've seen more kickers and defenses accomplish that based on the fantasy points that you guys can see on screen. That is absolutely ridiculous. The idea of selecting Travis Kelce in the first round and then following it up with someone like Nick Chubb or Derrick Henry or Tony Pollard in the second round is a fantastic opportunity that, if in fact lands upon your lap, you take advantage of it. But when we look at the rest of the tight end position, it's either you go big or you go home. You make it early tight end selection, you draft one of those primary studs, or you just go ahead and wait. Because to be totally honest, being patient in seasons past has certainly paid dividends. If you can see to the very right side of the graphic, we have first-time tight end wins over the course of the last 5 seasons. These are tight ends that for the first time in their careers ranked within the top 12 of their position in a half PPR scoring format within that season. So 2018 consisting of 5 tight ends, 2019 with 6, 2020 with 5, 2021 with 3, and 2022 with 4. A lot of these guys over the last couple of years have been waiver wire pickups. Taysom Hill, of course, Dalton Schultz, guys like Dawson Knox, obviously having themselves success in seasons past. These are players that over the course of the last couple of years have been stud options primarily because they came out of nowhere and they ended up producing fantastic seasons. So instead of utilizing your early draft capital on a tight end this upcoming season that is potentially going to be in the middle of the pack within their own position, think of just probably going elsewhere. Again, you got to remember, it's a one-start position. And the overall contribution to your team, especially in a league in which you're playing with 3 wide receivers starting, it would be hard for me in 2023 to contribute high draft capital for a tight end who's only going to score 130, 135 fantasy points when I can get kickers and defenses far later in the draft who are solidified and are going to be fantastic for me, while other people in your league are avoiding those positions. You can go ahead and bring in players that are just as valuable and contribute just as much on a weekly basis in comparison to the tight end that you could have rostered, with a huge discount with those kickers and defenses coming way later, while you're still able to wait and see if you can get that waiver wire stud like there have been over the last couple of years at the tight end position. Now, to go ahead and close out today's conversation regarding early round draft strategy, again, let's go ahead and talk about quarterbacks. We have seen over the course of this offseason a lot of quarterbacks being selected early in drafts. Via Underdog Fantasy, a lot of quarterbacks are coming off the board in the second and third rounds. Of course, even via ESPN's ADPs, Patrick Mahomes has an ADP of 13. He's the first pick of the second round in a 12-team league, which is absolutely ridiculous. But is it? When you think about the top 3 quarterbacks going into our 2023 drafts, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and Josh Allen, all 3 of those quarterbacks are capable of being the number 1 overall quarterback by the end of the season. They're all capable of scoring over 400 fantasy points. And the reason why this is so likely is because the shift that we have seen at the quarterback position with far more mobility and far more fantasy points being contributed by them. Now, in order to demonstrate what kind of a difference that we have seen over the course of the last 3 seasons in comparison to the last 20 years, specifically from 2020 through 2022, we have seen 14 different quarterbacks in their respective season score 350 or more fantasy points in a 4-point per passing touchdown league. While when we compare that to 2004 through 2019, we saw only 16 quarterbacks in 16 seasons produce 350 or more fantasy points in their respective season. The frequency in which we're seeing it as of late is at an all-time high, and being able to attain one of these quarterbacks who not only has the ability, but has the very high potential of being the number 1 overall quarterback in fantasy football, based on what we've seen in the last 3 seasons in terms of quarterback drop-off in production, like demonstrated on the right side of the screen. If you're able to get a quarterback who's going to put up 400 points, and you compare to that someone that is potentially getting the number 10 overall quarterback, maybe they want to settle and get someone like Geno Smith or Deshaun Watson. In comparison, the drop-off in production could very easily be 90 to 100 points. And the difference between selecting, someone like Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes in the second round, when you're getting a 100-point advantage over a lot of the other teams in your league, that's a huge overall difference maker. And in my mind, leans me in the direction of trying to go ahead and select one of these stud quarterbacks. Sure, I don't have to go ahead and get one of those main 3. I can get, Lamar Jackson and or Justin Fields in the 4th round, who both certainly have the potential of not only racking up a lot of rushing yards, but getting the fantasy points alongside that, which can certainly lead to success for fantasy football. So in my mind, the idea of selecting an early quarterback should never be out of sight, because if in fact you're playing in a league, especially where you only have 2 starting running backs, 2 starting wide receivers, a tight end, 1 flex, that quarterback position every single week has that much of a higher overall contribution to your success. And if you're able to grab a stud like one of these quarterbacks, it'll do you favors in the long run, in my mind. So just to go ahead and give you a quick overview of today's episode, the entire objective as you approach your 2023 fantasy football drafts, mock drafts, etc., as you approach the season, is to be able to objectively pick the best available player on the board, whether that be a wide receiver, a tight end, a running back, it does not matter. You want to build the best overall team, because again, by the time you get to week 17, the nucleus and pretty much foundation that you build in the early rounds is going to set you up for success or failure in the future. Now, when we talk about wide receivers, again, there's a reason why there's so many coming off the board, because the running back position has built a little bit more depth and built a little bit more reliance over the last couple of seasons, as there are players that are 3 down backs and finding a lot of success without handcuffs digging into their work. We have wide receivers who are studs at their positions and associated with teams that are always going to litter them with opportunities that is going to lead to success. We have running backs that, even though people are afraid of drafting them in the 1st round, like Nick Chubb, like Derrick Henry, like Tony Pollard, are going to be discount picks in that 2nd round. There's even the potential opportunity of going into this upcoming season, selecting someone like Saquon Barkley in your 1st round and being able to match him up with someone like Nick Chubb in your 2nd round. It may seem crazy, but I've seen it happen. I've drafted via Underdog, and I've experienced that already thus far this season. So selecting running backs because of the depth is begin to kind of lean people towards grabbing wide receivers, which by all means, do me the favor. Let me continue to go ahead and collect some stud running backs. In regards to tight ends, again, you either go big or you go home. Don't waste your time with any of those other, tight ends from rounds 4 through, 7-ish. I'd rather just go ahead and take Travis Kelce early if the opportunity is on hand and he's the best available player, because I know I can pair him up with a stud in the 2nd and 3rd rounds, and I know that position is solidified for the remainder of the year, while in comparison to drafting one way later, it's just far more volatile, which could be a little bit detrimental to your overall cause in comparison to what you might want it to be. So that pretty much covers it. Again, draft your wide receivers. Don't be afraid of them. The running back position is being discounted on at a premium, which is absolutely incredible. We love to see that, especially as someone who has always been a draft running backs only advocate. This is a perfect season to not only get a stud wide receiver, but pair them up with stud running backs, or just get a bunch of stud running backs and let them carry you to the promised land. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Again, if you guys haven't checked out the content, I'm back posting daily for the entirety of the 2023 season. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet already. Also, like I mentioned earlier on today's episode, if you guys haven't checked out my draft guide, it's available via Underdog Fantasy right now. You go ahead to the link down in the description, click on it, sign up using code Andrew. Once you've made that sign up, make a first-time deposit minimum of $10. You'll get my fantasy football draft guide, the rankings associated with them, along with additional rankings updated every week throughout the month of August, and weeks 1 through 18 flex, positional, by tier, half PPR, full PPR rankings every Sunday morning in order to help you win a fantasy football championship. So help me help you. Use code Andrew via Underdog Fantasy. Get some drafts underneath your belt and enjoy. Until tomorrow, which we'll be talking about top 24 wide receiver rankings. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And until next time, I'll see you. Peace.